Hello, it's me, that writer you know. Sup? How's it going? Welcome back to another stream where today, just notice that. There we go. There we go. Hmm. Believe I never noticed that. I never readjusted that. Anyways, hi, it's me. Today is President's Day here in America, in the USA, and today we're gonna do a bit of a not really special stream. We've done shit like this before, on specifically the 4th of July. But today, we are doing some historical readings. Ooh. Um, I kind of wanted to do more readings throughout the year. And I figure, certain holidays are a great opportunity to do those. So today we are going to be reading some, not all, because that would destroy my throat. And I have work later today. But we're going to read some of the inaugural, there we go, uh, addresses of presidents of the U.S. So these are the speeches that they made that basically when they were elected. Um, or at some point after they were elected. And yeah, we're going to be reading through them. Today, I have no idea how far in we're going to get, but we're going to be basically doing every president in order. I've got a book here that is a compilation of those addresses called Presidential Inaugural Addresses. I don't know why that word is tripping me up so much. This is a book from a series that I have been reading from for the past couple years on 4th of July. It's from a box set called Foundations of Freedom by Word Cloud Classics. This is the same series of books that I've been reading the works of Thomas Paine from, such as Common Sense and the Rights of Man. But it's also got other things, such as works of Frederick Douglass, which we might actually be reading on like Juneteenth or something. We've got the autobiography of Ben Franklin. We've got some selected works of Alexander Hamilton, as well as a bunch of other American writings. Literally, the U.S. Constitution, other key American writings, which had shit like the Mayflower Compact and Social Security Act, and let's see what else we got. The Constitution, of course, the Treaty of Paris, the Articles of Confederation, the Federalist Papers. I actually really want to read the Federalist Papers. Um, so again, those are like potential future readings. Um, and also like literally on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I had an idea. It's like, oh, I should read some Martin Luther. Fortunately, I don't own any MLK Jr. books, so that's maybe a next year kind of thing. Um, and maybe next year as well, we'll also do maybe some more stuff for like Black History Month. As well. But today, we're reading presidential inaugural addresses. And you know what that means. We're bringing back the classic screen. Wabam. There we go, baby. Last night I spent like an hour just like finding a bunch of portraits of like all of the US presidents. It was wild. We're going to be changing those out as we read through these. Normally, I would be playing music as like just kind of some background music as we do this, but as y'all know, my fucking long ass music playlist is borked. So like, you know, that's a bit awkward because it doesn't like auto advance, and I don't want to be stopping every like 3 minutes or so to just click play on a video. So you'll just have to enjoy my voice, my sleepy, tired voice. As I gently read some inaugural speech. God, that word is just tripping me up today. Whew. So let's see. So open up the book. So this by Word Cloud Classics compilation of all of these inaugural addresses, and they go from George Washington all the way up to Donald Trump, like right when the book was published. As it was published in Czechs, 2019 by Canterbury Classics. So, let us start as we begin with George Washington. First inaugural address, Thursday, April 30th, 1789. I like that it gives the day that the speech was on, which I have included in the old overlay there. And this should be a nice context, and maybe we'll see some patterns going on as we in like those dates, like when they do the addresses, for example. So, and we know what day it was. It was Thursday. So let us begin. Fellow citizens of the Senate and of the House of Representatives, among the vicissitudes incident to life, no event could have filled me with greater anxieties than that of which the notification was transmitted by your order and received on the 14th day of the present month. On the one hand, I was summoned by my country, whose voice I can never hear but with veneration and love, from a retreat which I had chosen with the fondest predilection, and in my flattering hopes, with an immutable decision, as the asylum of my declining years, a retreat which was rendered every day more necessary, as well as more dear to me by the addition of habit to inclination, and of frequent interruptions in my health to the gradual waste committed on it by time. On the other hand, the magnitude and difficulty of the trust to which the voice of my country called me, being sufficient to awaken in the wisest and most experienced of her citizens a distrustful scrutiny into his qualifications, could not but overwhelm with despondence one who, inheriting inferior endowments from nature and unpracticed in the duties of civic administration, ought to be peculiarly conscious of his own deficiencies. In this conflict of emotions, all I dare aver is is that it has been my faithful study to collect my duty from a just appreciation of every circumstance by which it might be affected. All I dare hope is that if, in executing this task, I have been too much swayed by a grateful remembrance of former instances, or by an affectionate sensibility to this transcendent proof of the confidence of my fellow citizens, and have thence too little consulted my incapacity as well as a disinclination for the weighty and untried cares before me, my error will be palliated by the motives which misled me, and its consequences be judged by my country with some share of the partiality in which they originated. A lot of big words there, holy shit. Few words that I didn't even know. What the fuck does aver mean? Aver. State or assert to be the case.
Aver.
Aver. Okay. 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 Already learning new words. Okay. Okay. On to the second paragraph. Such being the impressions under which I have, in obedience to the public summons repaired to the president or to the present station, it would be peculiarly improper to omit in this first official act my fervent supplications to that Almighty Being who rules over the universe, who presides in the councils of nations, and whose providential aids can supply every human defect, that his benediction may consecrate to the liberties and happiness of the people of the United States a government instituted by themselves for these essential purposes, and may enable every instrument employed in its administration to execute with success the functions allotted to its charge. In tendering this homage to the great author of every public and private good, I assure myself that it expresses your sentiments not less than my own, nor those of my fellow citizens at large less than either. No people can be bound to acknowledge and adore the invisible hand which conducts the affairs of men more than those of the United States. Every step by which they have advanced to the character of an independent nation seems to have been distinguished by some token of providential agency. And in the important revolution just accomplished in the system of their united government, the tranquil deliberations and voluntary consent of so many distinct communities from which the event has resulted cannot be compared with the means by which most governments have been established without some return of pious gratitude, along with a humble anticipation of the future blessings which the past seemed to presage. These reflections arising out of the present crisis have forced themselves too strongly on my mind to be suppressed. You will join with me, I trust, in thinking that there are none under the influence of which the proceedings of a new and free government can more auspiciously commence. By the article establishing the executive department, it is made the duty of the President to recommend to your consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. The circumstances under which I now meet you will acquit me from entering into that subject further than to refer to the great constitutional charter under which you are assembled, and which, in defining your powers, designates the objects to which your attention is to be given. It will be more consistent with those circumstances, and far more congenial with the feelings which actuate me, to substitute, in place of a recommendation of particular measures, the tribute that is due to the talents, the rectitude, and the patriotism which adorn the characters selected to devise and adopt them. In these honorable qualifications I behold the surest pledges that as on one side no local prejudices or attachments, no separate views or party animosities will misdirect the comprehensive and equal eye which ought to watch over this great assemblage of communities and interests. So, on another, that the foundation of our national policy will be laid in the pure and immutable principles of private morality, and the preeminence of free government be exemplified by all the attributes which can win the affections of its citizens, and command the respect of the world. I dwell on this prospect with every satisfaction which an ardent love of my country can inspire, since there is no truth more thoroughly established than that there exists in the economy and course of nature an indissoluble union between virtue and happiness, between duty and advantage, between the genuine maxims of an honest and magnanimous policy and the solid rewards of public prosperity and felicity. Since we ought to be no less persuaded that the propitious smiles of heaven can never be expected on a nation that disregards the eternal rules of order and right which heaven itself has ordained, and since the preservation of the sacred fire of liberty and the destiny of the republican model of government are justly considered, perhaps as deeply as finally staked on the experiment entrusted to the hands of the American people. Besides the ordinary objects submitted to your care, it will remain with your judgment to decide how far an exercise of the occasional power delegated by the fifth article of the Constitution is rendered expedient at the present juncture by the nature of objections which have been urged against the system, or by the degree of inquietude which has given birth to them. Instead of undertaking particular recommendations on this subject, in which I could be guided by no lights derived from official opportunities, I shall again give way to my entire confidence in your discernment in pursuit of the public good. For I assure myself that whilst you carefully avoid every alteration which might endanger the benefits of a united and effective government, or which ought to wait for future lessons of experience, a reverence for the characteristic rights of free men and a regard for the public harmony will sufficiently influence your deliberations on the question of how far the former can be impregnably fortified, or the latter can be safely and advantageously promoted. To the ongoing observations, I have one to add, which will be most properly addressed to the House of Representatives. It concerns myself, and will therefore be as brief as possible. When I was first honored with a call into the service of my country, then on the eve of the arduous struggles for its liberties, the light in which I contemplated my duty required that I should renounce every pecuniary compensation. From this pecuniary, what does that mean? Pecuniary. Relating to or consisting of money. Money. Financial, basically. Okay. Got it. Very good. Very good. Alright. Pecuniary compensation. From this resolution, I have in no instance departed, and being still under the impressions which produced it, I must decline inapplicable to myself any share in the personal emoluments which may be indispensably included in a permanent provision for the executive department, and must accordingly pray to the pecuniary estimates for the station in which I am placed may, during my continuance in it, be limited to such actual expenditures as the public good may be thought to require. Having thus imparted to you my sentiments as they have been awakened by the occasion which brings us together, I shall take my present leave, but not without resorting once more to the benign parent of the human race, in humble supplication that, since he has been pleased to favor the American people with opportunities for deliberating in perfect tranquillity, and dispositions for deciding which unparalleled uh, unanimity on a form of government for the security of their union and the advancement of their happiness, so his divine blessing may be equally conspicuous in the enlarged views the temperate consultations and the wise measures on which the success of this government must depend. Okay. 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 That was the first speech. He did have a second term, which I'm looking at it, and it's like 2 paragraphs, 2 short paragraphs, which is great. Uh, so the next one took place on March 4th, 1793. Now, George Washington had a second term. Uh, as our foist president. Then he didn't have another one afterwards because he didn't want to be no king, which was kind of alluded to in that last one. And yeah, so George Washington's second inaugural address, Monday, March 4th, 1793. Fellow citizens, I am again called upon by the voice of my country to execute the functions of its chief magistrate. When the occasion proper for it shall arrive, I shall endeavor to express the high sense I entertain of this distinguished honor, and of the confidence which has been reposed in me by the people of United America. Previous to the execution of any official act of the President, the Constitution requires an oath of office. This oath I am now about to take, and in your presence, that if it shall be found during my administration of the government I have in any instance violated willingly or knowingly the injunctions thereof, I may, besides incurring constitutional punishment, be subject to the upbraidings of all who are now witness of the present solemn ceremony. That was his second address. That's it. That's it, baby. He was basically just an oath of office. Which I'm curious. I was like wondering how close that was to like the actual modern oath of office. Alright, so that was George Washington. Nice, short, second term inaugural address. Like doesn't go like just it's just like, all right, thanks everybody for electing me. Here's my oath to serve as president. Short and sweet. Very nice. All right. So next up, we got some good old John Adams. Whoops. Adams. So this next speech takes place also on March 4th, 1997. Gonna change. Where's the portrait? There it is. All right, where is good old John Adams? John Quincy Adams. There's John Adams. There he is. There he is. There's the lad. That image kind of goes off. I don't want to flip. There we go. Now he's looking this way. There he is. And do some like live readjusting of the portraits for some of these. This one turned out just perfect, though. Quite nice. Oh, you know what? Text. I see. Let's get this center aligned. There we go. There we go. Much better. John Adams, inaugural address, Saturday, March 4th, 1797. A bit long, couple pages. All right, all right. So these are the words of John Adams when he was first elected president. When it was first perceived in early times that no middle course for America remained between unlimited submission to a foreign legislator and a total independence of its claims, men of reflection were less apprehensive of danger from the formidable power of fleets and armies they must determine to resist than from those contests and dissensions which would certainly arise concerning the forms of government to be instituted over the whole and over the parts of this extensive country. Relying, however, on the purity of their intentions, the justice of their cause, and the integrity and intelligence of the people, under an overruling providence which had so signally protected this country from the first, the representatives of this nation, then consisting of little more than half its present number, not only broke to pieces the chains which were forged and the rod of iron that was lifted up, but frankly cut asunder the ties which had bound them, and launched into an ocean of uncertainty. The zeal and ardor of the people during the Revolutionary War supplying the place of government, commanded a degree of order sufficient at least for the temporary preservation of society. The Confederation, which was early felt to be necessary, was prepared from the models of the Batavian and Helvetic confederacies, the only example which remain with any detail and precision in history, and certainly the only ones which the people at large had ever considered. But reflecting on the striking difference in so many particulars between this country and those where a courier may go from the seat of government to the frontier in a single day, it was then certainly foreseen by some who assisted in Congress at the formation of it that it would not be durable. Negligence of its regulations, inattention to its recommendations, if not disobedience to its authority, not only in individuals but in states, soon appeared with their melancholy consequences. Universal languor, jealousies and rivalries of states, decline of navigation and commerce, discouragement of necessary manufactures, universal fall in the value of lands and their produce, contempt of public and private faith, loss of consideration and credit with foreign nations, and at length in discontents, animosities, combinations, partial conventions, and insurrection, threatening some great national calamity. In this dangerous crisis, the people of America were not abandoned by their usual good sense, presence of mind, resolution, or integrity. Measures were pursued to concert a plan to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty. The public discussions, and deliberations issued in the present happy constitution of government. Employed in the service of my country abroad during the whole course of these transactions, I first saw the Constitution of the United States in a foreign country. Irritated by no literary altercation, animated by no public debate, heated by no party animosity, I read it with great satisfaction, as the result of good heads prompted by good hearts, as an experiment better adapted to the genius, character, situation, and relations of this nation and country than any which had ever been proposed or suggested. In its general principles and great outlines, it was conformable to such a system of government as I had ever most esteemed, and in some states, my own native state in particular, had contributed to establish. Claiming a right of suffrage in common with my fellow citizens in the adoption or rejection of a constitution which was to rule me and my posterity, as well as them and theirs, I did not hesitate to express my approbation of it on all occasions, in public and in private. It was not then, nor has been since, any objection to it in my mind that the executive and senate were not more permanent. Nor have I ever entertained a thought of promoting any alteration in it but such as the people themselves, in the course of their experience, should see and feel to be necessary or expedient, and by their representatives in Congress and the state legislatures, according to the Constitution itself, adopt and ordain. Returning to the bosom of my country after a painful separation from it for 10 years, I had the honor to be elected to a station under the new order of things, and I have repeatedly laid myself under the more serious obligations to support the Constitution. The operation of it has equaled the most sanguine expectations of its friends, and from the habitual attention to it, satisfaction in its administration, and delight in its effects upon the peace, order, prosperity, and happiness of the nation, I have acquired a habitual attachment to it and veneration for it. What other form of government, indeed, can so well deserve our esteem and love? There may be little solidity in the ancient idea that congregations of men into cities and nations are the most pleasing objects in the sight of superior intelligences, but this is very certain, that to a benevolent human mind there can be no spectacle presented by any nation more pleasing, more noble, majestic, or august, than an assembly like that which has so often been seen in this and the other chamber of Congress, of a government in which the executive authority, as well as that of all the branches of the legislature, are exercised by citizens selected at regular periods by their neighbors to make and execute laws for the general good. Can anything essential, anything more than mere ornament and decoration, be added to this by robes and diamonds? Can authority be more amiable and respectable when it descends from accidents or institutions established in remote antiquity, than when it springs forth from the hearts and judgments of an honest and enlightened people? For it is the people only that are represented. It is their power and majesty that is reflected, and only for their good in every legitimate government, under whatever form it may appear. The existence of such a government as ours for any length of time is a full proof of a general dissemination of knowledge and virtue throughout the whole body of the people. And what object or consideration more pleasing than this can be presented to the human mind? If national pride is ever justifiable or excusable, it is when it springs not from power or riches, grandeur or glory, but from conviction of national innocence, information, and benevolence. In the midst of these pleasing ideas, we should be unfaithful to ourselves, we should be unfaithful to ourselves if we should ever lose sight of the danger to our liberties, if anything partial or extraneous should infect the purity of our free, fair, virtuous, and independent elections. If an election is to be determined by a majority of a single vote, and that can be procured by a party through artifice or corruption, the government may be the choice of a party for its own ends, not of the nation for the national good. If the solitary suffrage can be obtained by foreign nations, by flattery or menaces, by fraud or violence, by terror, intrigue, or venality, the government may not be the choice of the American people, but of foreign nations. It may be foreign nations who govern us, and not we, the people, who govern ourselves, and candid men will acknowledge that in such cases choice would have little advantage to boast of over lot or chance. Looks over at our party system. Our gerrymandered as fuck party system. Such is the amiable and interesting system of government, and such are some of the abuses to which it may be exposed, which the people of America have exhibited to the admiration and anxiety of the wise and virtuous of all nations for 8 years under the administration of a citizen who, by a long course of great actions, regulated by prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude, conducting a people inspired with the same virtues and animated with the same ardent patriotism and love of liberty, to independence and peace, to increasing wealth and unexampled prosperity, has merited the gratitude of his fellow citizens, commanded the highest praises of foreign nations, and secured immortal glory with posterity. In that retirement, which is his voluntary choice, may he long live to enjoy the delicious recollection of his services, the gratitude of mankind, the happy fruits of them to himself and the world, which are daily increasing, and that splendid prospect of the future fortunes of this country which are opening from year to year. His name may still be a rampart, and the knowledge that he lives a bulwark against all open or secret enemies of his country's peace. This example has been recommended to the imitation of his successors by both houses of Congress and by the voice of the legislators and the people throughout the nation. On this subject, it might become me better to be silent or to speak with a diffidence. But as something may be expected, the occasion, I hope, will be admitted as an apology. I venture to say that if a preference upon principle of a free republican government, formed upon long and serious reflection after a diligent and impartial inquiry after truth, if an attachment to the Constitution of the United States, Burns page, and a conscientious determination to support it until it shall be altered by the judgments and wishes of the people, expressed in the mode prescribed in itself, if a respectful attention to the constitutions of the individual states, and a constant caution and delicacy toward the state governments, if an equal and impartial regard to the rights, interest, honor, and happiness of all the states in the Union, without preference or regard to the northern or southern, and eastern or western position, their various political opinions on unessential points, or their personal attachments. If a love of virtuous men of all parties and denominations, if a love of science and letters, and a wish to patronize every rational effort to encourage schools, colleges, universities, academies, and every institution for propagating knowledge, virtue, and religion among all classes of the people, not only for their benign influence on the happiness of life in all its stages and classes, and of society in all its forms, but as the only means of preserving our Constitution from its natural enemies, the spirit of sophistry, the spirit of party, the spirit of intrigue, the profligacy of corruption, the pestilence of foreign influence, which is the angel of destruction to elective governments, if a love of equal laws, of justice and humanity in the interior administration, an inclination to improve agriculture, commerce, and manufacturers for necessity, convenience, and defense, of a spirit of equity and humanity towards the aboriginal nations of America, and a disposition to ameliorate their condition by inclining them to be more friendly to us, and our citizens to be more friendly to them, of an inflexible determination to maintain peace and inviolable faith of all nations, and that system of neutrality and impartiality among the belligerent powers of Europe, which has been adopted by this government, and so solemnly sanctioned by both houses of Congress, and applauded by the legislators of the states and the public opinion, until it shall be otherwise ordained by Congress, if a personal esteem for the French nation formed in a residence of 7 years chiefly among them, and a sincere desire to preserve the friendship which has been so much for the labor and interest of both nations. If, for the conscious honor and integrity of the people of America, and the internal sentiment of their own power and energies must be preserved, an earnest endeavor to investigate every just cause, and remove every colorable pretense of complaint. This is one sentence, by the way. One sentence. This like huge ass paragraph. It's just got like a bunch of semicolons. We're like 2/3 of the way through it. Need a drink. Alright. Alright. Here we go. If an intention to pursue the amicable negotiation of reparation for the injuries that have been committed on the commerce of her fellow citizens by whatever nation, and if success cannot be obtained, to lay the facts before the legislator, that they may consider what further measures the honor and interest of the government and its constituents demand. Semicolon. If a resolution to do justice as far as may depend upon me at all times and to all nations, and maintain peace, friendship, and benevolence with all the world. Semicolon. If an unshaken confidence in the honor, spirit, and resources of the American people, on which I have so often hazarded my all and never been deceived. Semicolon. If elevated ideas of the high destinies of this country and of my own duties toward it, founded on a knowledge of the moral principles and intellectual improvements of the people, deeply engraven on my mind in early life, and not obscured but exalted by experience and age. Semicolon. And with humble reverence, I feel it to be my duty to add, if a veneration for the religion of a people who profess and call themselves Christians, and a fixed resolution to consider a decent respect for Christianity among the best recommendations for the public service, can enable me in any degree to comply with your wishes, it shall be my strenuous endeavor that this sagacious injunction of the two houses shall not be without effect. Period. Finally. With this great example before me, with the sense and spirit, the faith and honor, the duty and interest of the same American people pledged to support the Constitution of the United States, I entertain no doubt of its continuance in all its energy, and my mind is prepared without hesitation to lay myself under the most solemn obligations to support it to the utmost of my power. And may that being who is supreme over all, the patron of order, the fountain of justice, and the protector in all ages of the world of virtuous liberty, continue his blessing upon this nation and its government, and give it all possible success and duration consistent with the ends of his providence. All right. That was John Adams. Take a big old sippy. All right. And we're at Thomas Jefferson. All right. When did he give his speech? March 4th. I'm seeing a pattern here. 1801. And then we gotta change our little portrait there. Oh, got a little tiny portrait. Oh, that one fits. That one fits just right underneath the little presidential inaugural addresses bit. It's just right. All right. There. Okay. Checks time. Probably be having dinner soon. This is a long one. We'll probably not be able to finish it before dinner happens. Adjust my light a little bit. I need better lighting in this room. I like a little tiny desk lamp in the corner. Okay. I did find it interesting that John Adams, like, uh, was the first to directly reference Christianity specifically. Like, George Washington made reference to, like, a god, Not necessarily the Christian God, but just some sort of God. And John Adams seems to have just been was just like Christianity. That's an interesting thing to note. It's very long-winded. Okay. All right, Thomas Jefferson, first inaugural address. That word just keeps tripping me up, man. Wednesday, March 4th, 1801. Friends and fellow citizens. We have a different like address. George Washington just went with the old fellow citizens. Now we've got friends and fellow citizens. Okay. Friends and fellow citizens. Called upon to undertake the duties of the first executive office of our country, I avail myself to the presence of that portion of my fellow citizens which is here assembled to express my grateful thanks for the favor with which they have been pleased to look toward me, uh, to declare a sincere consciousness that the task is above my talents, and that I approach it with those which the greatness of the charge and the weakness of my powers so justly inspire. A rising nation, spread over a wide and fruitful land, traversing all the seas, which, with the rich productions of our industry, engaged in commerce with nations who feel power and forget right, advancing rapidly to destinies beyond the reach of mortal eye. When I contemplate these transcendent objects and see the honor, the happiness, and the hopes of this beloved country committed to the issue and the auspices of this day, I shrink from the contemplation and humble myself before the magnitude of the undertaking. Utterly, indeed, should I despair, did not the presence of many whom I here see remind me that in the other high authorities provided by our Constitution I shall find resources of wisdom, of virtue, and of zeal, on which to rely under all difficulties. To you, then, gentlemen who are charged with the sovereign functions of legislation, and to those associated with you, I look with encouragement and for guidance and support which may enable us to steer with safety the vessel in which we are all embarked amidst the conflicting elements of a troubled world. During the contest of opinion, through which we have passed, the animation of discussions and the exertions has sometimes worn an aspect which might impose on strangers unused to think freely, and to speak and to write what they think. But this being now decided by the voice of the nation, announced according to the rules of the Constitution, all will, of course, range themselves under the will of the law and unite in common efforts for the common good. All, too, will bear in mind this sacred principle that, though the will of the majority is in all cases to prevail, that will to be rightful must be reasonable, that the minority possesses their equal rights, which equal law must protect, and to violate would be oppression. Let us, then, fellow citizens, unite with one heart and one mind. Let us restore to social intercourse that harmony and affection within which, or without which, liberty and even life itself are but dreary things. And let us reflect that, having banished from our land that religious intolerance under which mankind so long bled and suffered, we have yet gained little if we countenance a political intolerance as despotic, as wicked, and capable of as bitter and bloody persecutions. During the throes and convulsions of the ancient world, during the agonizing spasms of infuriating men seeking through blood and slaughter his long lost liberty, It was not wonderful that the agitation of the billows should reach even this distant and peaceful shore, and this should be more felt and feared by some and less by others, and should divide opinions as to measures of safety. But every difference of opinion is not a difference of principle. We have we have called by different names brethren of the same people. We are all Republicans, we are all Federalists. If there be any among us who would wish to dissolve this union or to change its republican form, let them stand undisturbed as monuments of the safety with which error of opinion may be tolerated, where reason is left free to combat it. I know, indeed, that some honest men fear that a republican government cannot be strong, that this government is not strong enough, but would the honest patriot, in the full tide of successful experiment, abandon a government which has so far kept us free and firm on the rhetoric and visionary fear that this government, the world's best hope, may by possibility want energy to preserve itself? I trust not. I believe this, on the contrary, the strongest government on earth. I believe it the only one where every man, at the call of the law, would fly to the standard of the law, and would meet invasions of the public order as his own personal concern. Sometimes it is said that man cannot be trusted with the government of himself. Can he then be trusted? Uh, can he then be trusted with the government of others? Or have we found angels in the form of kings to govern him? Let history answer this question. Let us then, with courage and confidence, pursue our own federal and republican principles, our attachment to union and representative government, kindly separated by nature and a wide ocean from the exterminating havoc of one quarter of the globe, too high-minded to endure the degradations of the others, possessing a chosen country with room enough for our descendants, entertaining a due sense of our equal right to the use of our own faculties, to the acquisitions of our own industry, to honor and confidence from our fellow citizens, resulting not from birth but from our actions and their sense of them, enlightened by a benign religion, professed, indeed, and practiced in various forms, yet all of them inculcating honesty, truth, temperance, gratitude, and the love of man. Gay. Uh, Acknowledging and adoring and overruling providence, which by all its dispensations proves that it delights in the happiness of man here and his greater happiness hereafter. I got called down for dinner. I'll finish this paragraph. With all these blessings, what more is necessary to make us happy and a prosperous people? Still one thing more, fellow citizens. Wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government, and this is necessary to close the circle of our felicities. Speech is not done, but we are going to take a break. Change on over to this. Boop. Boop. I am back. Had pork chops and mushroom sauce over rice. Pretty good. Anyways, that was a good rest for my voice. Let us return. Alright, so we were reading Thomas Jefferson's first inaugural address. Kind of got like what? Two pages in? Yeah. How much more is left? About a page and a half. Or more like 2 pages. Okay. Let us continue. with the presidential speeches. Let's see. Let's just go back a couple sentences and let me recontextualize ourselves. Let's see. Still one more thing, fellow citizens. A wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government, and this is necessary to close the circle of our felicities. There we go. About to enter, fellow citizens, on the exercise of duties which comprehend everything dear and valuable to you, it is proper you should understand what I deem the essential principles of our government, and consequently those which ought to shape its administration. I will compress them within the narrowest compass they will bear, stating the general principle, but not all its limitations. Equal and exact justice to all men, of whatever state or persuasion, religious or political, peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling we're good at that one. Entangling alliances with none, doing great at that one. The support of the state governments in all their rights as the most competent administrations of our domestic concerns and the surest bulwarks against anti-republican tendencies. We're doing great on that respect. The preservation of the general government in its whole constitutional vigor as the sheer anchor of our peace at home and safety abroad. The jealous care of the right of election by the people, a mild and safe corrective of abuses which are lopped by the sword of revolution, where peaceable remedies are unprovided, absolute acquiescence in the decisions of the majority, the vital principle of republics, from which is no appeal but to force, the vital principle and immediate parent of despotism, a well-disciplined militia, our best reliance in peace and for the first moments of war, till regulars may relieve them, the supremacy of the civil over the military authorities, economy in the public expense, that labor may be lightly burthened, the honest payment of our debts and sacred preservation of the public faith, encouragement of agriculture and of commerce as its handmaid, the diffusion of information and arraignment of all abuses at the bar of the public reason, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, and freedom of person under protection of the habeas corpus, and trial by juries impartially selected. These principles form the bright constellation which has gone before us and guided our steps through an age of revolution and reformation. The wisdom of our sages and blood of our heroes have been devoted to their attainment. They should be the creed of our political faith, the text of civic instruction, the touchstone by which to try the services of those we trust. And should we wander from them in moments of error or of alarm, let us hasten to retrace our steps and to regain the road which alone leads to peace, liberty, and safety. I repair, then, fellow citizens, to the post you have assigned me. With experience enough in subordinate offices to have seen the difficulties of this, the greatest of all, I have learnt to expect that it will rarely fall to the lot of imperfect man to retire from this station with the reputation and the favor which bring him into it, without pretensions to that high confidence you reposed in our first and greatest revolutionary character, whose preeminent services had entitled him to the first place in his country's love, and destined for him the fairest page in the volume of faithful history. I ask so much confidence only as may give firmness and effect to the legal administration of your affairs. I shall often go wrong through defect of judgment. When right, I shall often be thought wrong by those whose positions will not command a view of the whole ground. I ask your indulgence for my own errors, which will never be intentional, and your support against the errors of others, who may condemn what they would not if seen in all its parts. The approbation applied by your suffrage is a great consolation to me for the past, and my future solicitude will be to retain the good opinion of those who have bestowed it in advance, to conciliate that of others by doing them all the good in my power, and to be instrumental to the happiness and freedom of all. Relying then on the patronage of your good will, I advance with obedience to the work, ready to retire from it whenever you become sensible how much better choice it is in your power to make. And may the infinite power which rules the destinies of the universe lead our counsels to what is best, and give them a favorable issue for your peace and prosperity. All right. The end of his first speech. Next one. 05. Ugh. All right. Need some big old gulps of tea there. All right. Thomas Jefferson's second inaugural address. That word keeps tripping me up. It's gonna do it the entire time, I think. Monday, March 4th, 1805. Proceeding, fellow citizens, to that qualification which the Constitution requires before my entrance on the charge again conferred on me, it is my duty to express the deep sense I entertain of this new proof of confidence from my fellow citizens at large, and the zeal with which it inspires me so to conduct myself as may best satisfy their just expectations. On taking this station on a former occasion, I declared the principles on which I believed it my duty to administer the affairs of our Commonwealth. My conscience tells me I have on every occasion acted up to that declaration, according to its obvious import and to the understanding of every candid mind. In the transaction of your foreign affairs, we have endeavored to cultivate the friendship of all nations, and especially of those with which we have the most important relations. We have done them justice on all occasions, favored where favor was lawful, and cherished mutual interests and intercourse on fair and equal terms. We are firmly convinced, and we act on that conviction, that with nations as with individuals, our interests soundly calculated will ever be found inseparable from our moral duties. And history bears witness to the fact that a just nation is trusted on its word when recourse is had to armaments and wars to bridle others. At home, fellow citizens, you best know whether we have done well or ill. The suppression of unnecessary offices, of useless establishments and expenses, enabled us to discontinue our internal taxes. These, covering our land with officers and opening our doors to their intrusions, had already begun that process of domiciliary vexation which once entered which once entered is scarcely to be restrained from reaching successively every article of property and produce. If among these taxes some minor ones fell which had not been inconvenient, it was because their amount would not have paid the officers who collected them, and because, if they had any merit, the state authorities might adopt them instead of others less approved. The remaining revenue on the consumption of foreign articles is paid chiefly by those who can afford to add foreign luxuries to domestic comforts, being collected on our seaboard and frontiers only, and incorporated with the transactions of our mercantile citizens. It may be the pleasure and the pride of an American to ask what farmer, what mechanic, what laborer ever sees a tax gatherer of the United States. These contributions enabled us to support the current expenses of the government, to fulfill contracts with foreign nations, to extinguish the native right of soil within our limits, to extend those limits, and to apply such a surplus to our public debts as places at a short day their final redemption. And that redemption, once effected, the revenue thereby liberated may, by a just repartition of it among the states and a corresponding amendment of the Constitution, be applied in time of peace to rivers, canals, roads, arts, manufactures, education, and other great objects within each state. In time of war, if injustice by ourselves or others must sometimes produce war, increased as the same revenue will be by increased population and consumption, and aided by other resources reserved for that crisis, it may meet within the year all the expenses of the year without encroaching on the rights of future generations by burthening them with the debts of the past. War will then be but a suspension of useful works, and a return to a state of peace, a return to the progress of improvement. Talking about taxes. Ugh. I have said, fellow citizens, that the income reserved had enabled us to extend our limits, but that extension may possibly pay for itself before we are called on, and in the meantime may keep down the accruing interest. In all events, it will replace the advances we shall have made. I know that the acquisition of Louisiana had been disapproved by some from a candid apprehension that the enlargement of our territory would endanger its union. But who can limit the extent to which the federative principle may operate effectively? The larger our association, the less it will be shaken by local passions. And in any view, it is not better that the opposite bank of the Mississippi should be settled by our own brethren and children than by strangers of another family. With which should we be most likely to live in harmony and friendly intercourse? In matters of religion, I have considered that its free exercise is placed by the Constitution independent of the powers of the general government. I have therefore undertaken on no occasion to prescribe the religious exercises suited to it, but have left them, as the Constitution found them, under the direction and discipline of the Church or state authorities acknowledged by the several religious societies. The aboriginal inhabitants of these countries I have regarded with the commiseration their history inspires. Endowed with the faculties and the rights of men, breathing an ardent love of liberty and independence, and occupying a country which left them no desire but to be undisturbed, the stream of overflowing population from other regions directed itself on these shores, without power to divert or habits to contend against it. They have been overwhelmed by the current or driven before it, now reduced within limits too narrow for the hunter's state. Humanity enjoins us to teach them agriculture and the domestic arts, to encourage them to that industry which alone can enable them to maintain their place in existence, and to prepare them in time for that state of society which to bodily comforts adds the improvement of the mind and morals. We have therefore liberally furnished them with the implements of husbandry and household use. We have placed among them instructors in the arts of first necessity, and they are covered with the aegis of the law against aggressors from among ourselves. Imperialism. Already starting to see it. But the endeavors to enlighten them on the fate which awaits their present course of life, to induce them to exercise their reason, follow its dictates, and change their pursuits with the change of circumstances, have powerful obstacles to encounter. They are combined by the habits of their bodies, prejudices of their minds, ignorance, pride, and the influence of interested and crafty individuals among them, who feel themselves something in the present order of things and fear to become nothing in any other. These persons inculcate a sanctimonious reverence for the customs of their ancestors, that whatsoever they did must be done through all time. That reason is a false guide, and to advance under its counsel in their physical, moral, or political condition is perilous innovation. That their duty is to remain as their Creator made them, ignorance being safety, and knowledge full and knowledge full of danger. In short, my friends, among them also is seen the action and counteraction of good sense and of bigotry. They too have their anti-philosophists who find an interest in keeping things in their present state, who dread reformation and exert all their faculties to maintain the ascendancy of habit over the duty of improving our reason and obeying its mandates. God, this is so imperialistic. In giving these outlines, I do not mean, fellow citizens, to arrogate to myself the merit of the measures. That is due, in the first place, to the reflecting character of our citizens at large, who, by the weight of public opinion, influence and strengthen the public measures. It is due to the sound discretion with which they select from among themselves those to whom they confide the legislative duties. It is due to the zeal and wisdom of the characters thus selected, who lay the foundations of public happiness and wholesome laws, the execution of which alone remains for others, and is due to the able and faithful auxiliaries, there we go, whose patriotism has associated them with me in the executive functions. Wholesome laws sounds like an oxymoron. During this course of administration, and in order to disturb it, the artillery of the press has been leveled against us, charged with whatsoever its licentious could devise or dare. These abuses of an institution so important to freedom and science are deeply to be regretted, inasmuch as they tend to lessen its usefulness and to sap its safety. They might, indeed, have been corrected by the wholesome punishments reserved to and provided by the laws of the several states against falsehood and defamation, but public duties more urgent press on the time of public servants, and the offenders have therefore been left to find their punishment in the public indignation. So now he's attacking the press. All right. Okay, Jefferson. Okay, buddy. Nor was it uninteresting to the world that the experiment should be fairly and fully made, where the freedom of discussion, unaided by power, is not sufficient for the propagation and protection of truth, whether a government conducting itself in the true spirit of its constitution, with zeal and purity, and doing no act which it would be unwilling the whole world should witness, can be written down by falsehood and defamation. The experiment has been tried. You have witnessed the scene. Our fellow citizens looked on, cool and collected. They saw the latent source from which these outrages proceeded. They gathered around their public functionaries, and when the Constitution called them to decision by suffrage, they pronounced their verdict, honorable to those who had served them and consolatory to the friend of man who believes that he may be trusted with the control of his own affairs. No inference is here intended that the laws provided by the states against false and defamatory publications should not be enforced. He who has time renders a service to public morals and public tranquility in reforming these abusive by the salutary coercions of the law. But the experiment is noted to prove that, since truth and reason have maintained their ground against false opinions, in league with false facts, the press, confined to truth, needs no other legal restraint. The public judgment will correct false reasoning and opinions on a full hearing of all parties, and no other definite line can be drawn between the inestimable liberty of the press and the demoralizing licentiousness. If there be still improprieties which this rule would not restrain, it's Supplement should be sought in the censorship of public opinion. Contemplating the union of sentiment now manifested so generally as auguring harmony and happiness to our future course, I offer to our country sincere congratulations. With those two not yet rallied to the same point, the disposition to do so is gaining strength. Facts are piercing through the veil drawn over them, and our doubting brethren will at length see that the mass of their fellow citizens, with whom they can not yet resolve to act as to principles and measures, think as they think and desire what they desire. That our wish, as well as theirs, is that the public efforts may be directed honestly to the public good, that peace be cultivated, civil and religious liberty unassailed, law and order preserved, equality of rights maintained, and that state of property, equal or unequal, which results to every man from his own industry or that of his fathers. When satisfied of these views, it is not in human nature that they should not approve and support them. In the meantime, let us cherish them with patient affection, let us do them justice, and more than justice, in all competitions of interest. And we need not doubt that truth, reason, and their own interests will at length prevail, will gather them into the fold of their country, and will complete that entire union of opinion which gives to a nation the blessing of harmony and the benefit of all its strength. I shall now enter on the duties to which my fellow citizens have again called me, and shall proceed in the spirit of those principles which they have approved. I fear not that any motives of interest may lead me astray. I am sensible of no passion which could seduce me knowingly from the path of justice, but the weaknesses of human nature and the limits of my own understanding will produce errors of judgment sometimes injurious to your interest. I shall need, therefore, all the indulgence which I have heretofore experienced from my constituents. The want of it will certainly not lessen with increasing years. I shall need, too, the favor of that being in whose hands we are, who led our fathers, as Israel of old, from their native land and planted them in a country flowing with all the necessities and comforts of life, who has covered our infancy in his providence and our riper years with his wisdom and power, and to whose goodness I ask you to join in supplications with me that he will so enlighten the minds of your servants, guide their counsels, and prosper their measures, that whatsoever they do shall result in your good, and shall secure to you the peace, friendship, and approbation of all nations. Now, that one was a bit of a doozy. He went full like cultural imperialism on the natives, and then was like, yo, fuck these slanderers in the press. Uh, if I remember correctly, that particular election was uh is what would later lead to the creation of political parties in the U.S. And it got pretty heated. It was kind of I guess the beginning of my brain just blanked on the rest of that thought. Uh the beginning of politicians using the media as a means of slandering one another, basically, of just like making their political ads just like diss tracks of their opponents, which is silly. Okay, we are now moving on to James Madison. Change. Okay. James Madison. Date March 4th, 1809. Portrait here. Like, oh, this one also just perfectly fits right underneath the title there. Very good. Very nice. All right. Okay. James Madison. First inaugural address. Saturday, March 4th, 1809. I actually pronounced inaugural correctly. First time. Unwilling to depart from examples of the most revered authority, I avail myself of the occasion now presented to express the profound impression made on me by the call of my country to the station of the duties from the wait, I misread that. Call of my country to the station to the duties to which I am about to pledge myself by the most solemn of sanctions. So distinguished a mark of confidence, proceeding from the deliberate and tranquil suffrage of a free and virtuous nation, would, under any circumstances, have commanded my gratitude and devotion, as well as filled me with an awful sense of the trust to be assumed. Under the various circumstances which give peculiar solemnity to the existing period, I feel that both the honor and the responsibility allotted to me are inexpressibly enhanced. The present situation of the world is indeed without a parallel, and that of our own country full of difficulties. The pressure of these, too, is the more severely felt because they have fallen upon us at a moment when the national prosperity being at a height not before attained. The contrast resulting from the change has been rendered the more striking. Under the benign under the benign influence of our republican institutions and the maintenance of peace with all nations, whilst so many of them were engaged in bloody and wasteful wars, the fruits of a just policy were enjoyed in an unrivaled growth of our faculties and resources. Proofs of this were seen in the improvements of agriculture, in the successful enterprises of commerce, in the progress of manufacturers and useful arts, and the increase of the public revenue and the use made of it in reducing the public debt, and in the valuable works and establishments everywhere multiplying over the face of our land. It is a precious reflection that the transition from this prosperous condition of our country to the scene which has for some time been distressing us is not changeable on any unwarrantable views, nor, as I trust, on any involuntary errors in the public councils. Indulging no passions which trespass on the rights or the repose of other nations. It has been the true glory of the United States to cultivate peace by observing justice, and to entitle themselves to the respect of the nations at war by fulfilling their neutral obligations with the most scrupulous impartiality. If there be candor in the world, the truth of these assertions will not be questioned. Posterity, at least, will do justice to them. The unexceptionable course could not avail against the injustice and violence of the belligerent powers. In their rage against each other, or impelled by more direct motives, principles of retaliation have been introduced equally contrary to universal reason and acknowledged law. How long their arbitrary edicts will be continued in spite of the demonstrations that not even a pretext for them has been given to the United States, and of the fair and liberal attempt to induce a revocation of them, cannot be anticipated. Assuring myself that under every vicissitude The determined spirit and united counsels of the nation will be safeguards to its honor and its essential interests. I repair to the post assigned me with no other discouragement from what springs from my own inadequacy to its high duties. If I do not sink under the weight of this deep conviction, it is because I find some support in a consciousness of the purposes and a confidence in the principles which I bring with me into this arduous service. To cherish peace and friendly intercourse with all nations having correspondent dispositions, to maintain sincere neutrality toward belligerent nations, to refer in all cases amicable discussion and reasonable accommodation of differences to a decision of them by an appeal to arms, to exclude foreign intrigues and foreign partialities, so degrading to all countries and so baneful to free ones, to foster a spirit of independence, too just to invade the rights of others, too proud to surrender our own, too liberal to indulge unworthy prejudices ourselves, and too elevated not to look down upon them in others. To hold the union of the states as the basis of their peace and happiness, to support the Constitution, which is the cement of the Union, as well in its limitations as in its authorities, to respect the rights and authorities reserved to the states and to the people as equally incorporated with and essential to the success of the general system, to avoid the slightest interference with the right of conscience or the functions of religion, so wisely exempted from civil jurisdiction, to preserve in their full energy the other salutary provisions uh, in behalf of private and personal rights and of the freedom of the press, to observe economy in public expenditures, to liberate the public resources by an honorable discharge of the public debts, to keep within the requisite limits a standing military force, always remembering that armed and trained militia is the firmest bulwark of republics, that without standing armies their liberty can never be in danger, nor with large ones safe, to promote by authorized means improvements friendly to agriculture, to manufactures, and to external as well as internal commerce, to favor in like manner the advancement of science and the diffusion of information as the best element to true liberty, to carry on the benevolent plans which have been so meritoriously applied to the conversion of our aboriginal neighbors from the degradation and wretchedness of savage life to a participation of the improvements of which the human mind and manners are susceptible in a civilized state, as far as sentiments and intentions such as these can aid the fulfillment of my duty, they will be a resource which cannot fail me. More imperialism. Second president in a row that has expressed imperialistic intent towards the natives. Okay. It is my good fortune, moreover, to have the path in which I am to tread lighted by examples of illustrious services successfully rendered in the most trying difficulties by those who have marched before me. Of those of my immediate predecessor, it might least become me here to speak. I may, however, be pardoned for not suppressing the sympathy with which my heart is full in the rich reward he enjoys in the benedictions of a beloved country, gratefully bestowed or exalted talents zealously devoted through a long career to the advancement of its highest interest and happiness. But the source to which I look, or the aids which alone can supply my deficiencies, is in the well-tried intelligence and virtue of my fellow citizens, and in the counsels of those representing them in the other departments associated in the care of the national interest. In these my confidence will under every difficulty be best placed, next to that which we have all been encouraged to feel in the guardianship and guidance of that almighty being whose power regulates the destiny of nations, whose blessings have been so conspicuously dispensed to this rising public, and to whom we are bound to address our devout gratitude for the past, as well as our fervent supplications and best hopes for the future. Okay. All right. That was his first address concluded. Now we move on to his second one, which is in 1813, still on March 4th. It was a tradition of having the inaugural address on March 4th has well been established at this point. See, basically since George Washington's second address. His first one took place on April 30th. But now we move on. James Madison's second inaugural address happened on a Thursday, March 14th, 1813. All right. Ugh. I believe we had just got our asses kicked by Canada at this point. Okay, so second inaugural address, Thursday, March 4th, 1813. About to add the solemnity of an oath to the obligations imposed by a second call to the station in which my country heretofore placed me, I find in the presence of this respectable assembly an opportunity of publicly repeating my profound sense of so distinguished a confidence, and of the responsibility united with it. The impressions on me are strengthened by such an evidence that my faithful endeavors be discharged, my uh, faithful endeavors to discharge my arduous duties have been favorably estimated, and by the consideration of the momentous period at which the trust has been renewed. From the weight and magnitude now belonging to it, I should be compelled to shrink if I had less reliance on the support of an enlightened and generous people, and felt less deeply a conviction that the war with a powerful nation, which forms so prominent a feature in our situation, is stamped with that justice that which invites the smiles of heaven on the means of conducting it to a successful termination. All right, wartime presidential speech. Let's go. May we not cherish this sentiment without presumption when we reflect on the characters by which this war is distinguished. It was not declared on the part of the United States until it had been long made on them, in reality, though not in name, until arguments and postulations had been exhausted, until a positive declaration had been received that the wrongs provoking it would not be discontinued, nor until this last appeal could no longer be delayed without breaking down the spirit of the nation, destroying all confidence in itself and its political institutions, and either perpetuating a state of disgraceful suffering or regaining by more costly sacrifices and more severe struggles our lost rank and respect among independent powers. On the issue of the war, we staked our national sovereignty on the high seas and the security of an important class of citizens whose occupations gave the proper value to those of every other class. Not to contend for such a stake is to surrender our equality with other powers on the element common to all, and to violate the sacred title which every member of this society has to its protection. I need not call into view the unlawfulness of the practice by which our mariners are forced at the will of every cruising officer from their own vessels into foreign ones, nor paint the outrages inseparable from it, The proofs are on the records of each successive administration of our government, and the cruel sufferings that of that portion to the American people have found their way to every bosom not dead to the sympathies of human nature. As the war was just in its origin and necessary and noble in its objects, we can reflect with a proud satisfaction that in carrying it on no principle of justice or honor, no usage of civilized nations, no precept of courtesy or humanity have been infringed. The war has been waged on our part with scrupulous regard to all these obligations, and in the spirit of liberality which was never surpassed. How little has been the effect of this example on the conduct of the enemy? They have retained as prisoners of war citizens of the United States, not liable to be so considered on the usages of war. They have refused to consider as prisoners of war and threatened to punish as traitors and deserters persons emigrating without restraint to the United States, incorporated by naturalization into our political family, and fighting under the authority of their adopted country in open and honorable war for the maintenance of its rights and safety. Such is the avowed purpose of a government which is in the practice of naturalizing by thousands citizens of other countries, and not only of permitting but compelling them to fight its battles against their native country. They have not, it is true, taken into their own hands the hatchet and the knife, devoted to indiscriminate massacre, but they have let loose the savages armed with these cruel instruments, have allured them into their service, and carried them to battle by their sides, eager to glut their savage thirst with the blood of the vanquished, and to finish the work of torture and death on maimed and defenseless captives. Uh, there's the anti-Native Americanism. I was wondering, because if I remember, War of 1812 was caused by it was like mainly fought in like the Ohio River Valley. Uh, and what was never before seen, British commanders have extorted victory over the unconquerable value of our troops, or valor of our troops, by presenting to the sympathy of their chief captives awaiting massacre from their savage associates. And now we find them, in further contempt of the modes of honorable warfare, supplying the place of a conquering force by attempts to disorganize our political society, to dismember our confederated republic. Happily, like others, these will recoil on the authors, but they mark the degenerate councils from which they emanate, and if they did not belong to a sense of unexampled inconsistencies, might excite the greater wonder as proceeding from a government which founded the very war in which it has been so long engaged on a charge against the disorganizing and insurrectional policy of its adversary. To render the justice of the war on our part the more conspicuous, the reluctance to commence it was followed by the earliest and strongest manifestations of a disposition to arrest its progress. The sword was scarcely out of the scabbard before the enemy was apprised of the reasonable terms on which it would be resheathed. Still more precise advances were repeated, and have been received in a spirit forbidding every reliance not placed on the military resources of the nation. These resources are amply sufficient to bring the war to an honorable issue. Our nation is in number more than half that of the British Isles. It is comprised of a brave, a free, a virtuous, and an intelligent people. Our country abounds in uh, necessaries, the arts, and the comforts of life. A general prosperity is visible in the public countenance. The means employed by the British cabinet to undermine it have recoiled on themselves, have given to our national faculties a more rapid development, and, draining or diverting the precious metals from British circulation and British vaults, have poured them into those of the United States. It is so propitious. It is a propitious consideration that an unavoidable war should have found this seasonable facility for the contributions required to support it. When the public voice called for war, all knew, and still know, that without them it could not be carried on through the period with which it might last. And the patriotism, the good sense, and the manly spirit of our fellow citizens are pledges for the cheerfulness with which they will bear each of his share of the common burden. To render the war short and its success sure, animated and systematic exertions alone are necessary, and the success of our arms now may long preserve our country with the necessity of another resort to them. Already have the gallant exploits of our naval heroes proved to the world our inherent capacity to maintain our rights on one element. If the reputation of our arms has been thrown under clouds on the other, presaging flashes of heroic enterprise assure us that nothing is wanting to correspondent triumphs. There also, but to discipline and habits which are in daily progress. All right, that was the guy. That was James Madison. Now we move on to another James Monroe. This is 1817, still on March 4th. 17, boom. Change our little portrait. The man of the doctrine. Oh, big image. Big image. Here he comes. Oh, Lord, he coming. There we go. Here we can, get rid of that a little bit. Get it so that his head isn't. There we go. There we go. Editing the image live. That was a huge ass image for some reason. All right. James Monroe. What time is it? Almost 7. And this is 5th president of the U.S. and the 8th presidential term. This is a long one. Nine pages. This speech is. Ah. James Monroe. First inaugural address. Tuesday, March 4th, 1817. I have hiccups. All right, Mr. Monroe, what do you have to say? Now, this is a guy who came up with or I guess like his approach to things. It's called the Monroe Doctrine. I'm pretty sure we still use today. My brain is blanking on what exactly the Monroe Doctrine was about. I want to say it's about the military. I don't remember. My brain tired. Anyways, James Monroe. First inaugural address, Tuesday, March 4th, 1817. I should be destitute of feeling if I was not deeply affected by the strong proof. Oh, hello. About a guy Monroe and how cool he was. Yeah, hello, Neko. How you doing? Welcome in to Historical Readings with Writer. We're reading presidential addresses on President's Day. Wow. We're on President number 5. How you doing, Neko, though? Welcome in. I should be destitute of feeling if I was not deeply affected by the strong proof which my fellow citizens have given me of their confidence in calling me to the high office whose functions I am about to assume. As the expression of their good opinion of my conduct in the public service, I derive from it a gratification which those who are conscious of having done all that they could to merit it, merit it can alone feel. There we go. My sensibility is increased by a just estimate of the importance of the trust and of the nature and extent of its duties, with the proper discharge of which the highest interests of a great and free people are intimately connected. Conscious of my own deficiency, I cannot enter on these duties without great anxiety for the result. From a just responsibility I will never shrink, calculating with confidence that in my best efforts to promote the public welfare my motives will always be duly appreciated, and my conduct be viewed with that candor and indulgence which I have experienced in other stations. How patriotic of you. Yeah, that's me. Known for my patriotism. Yep. Yep. And my love of American imperialism. That's me. All right. Second paragraph. In commencing the duties of the chief executive office, it has been the practice of the distinguished men who have gone before me to explain the principles which would govern them in their respective administrations. In following their venerated example, my attention is naturally drawn to the great causes which have contributed in a principal degree to produce the present happy condition of the United States. They will they will best explain the nature of our duties and shed much light on the policy which ought to be pursued in future. People giggle. Can I have that emote? People. It giggles. I have still yet to get to swap out the Christmas emotes. I'm on my phone today. Ah, I see. You left out an S. There's an S at the end. It's people giggles, not people giggle. All right. Alrighty then. Where were we? Right there. Okay. From the commencement of our revolution to the present day, almost 40 years have elapsed, and from the establishment of this Constitution, 28. Through this whole term, the government has been what may emphatically be called self government. And what has been the effect? To whatever object we turn our attention, whether it relates to our foreign or domestic concerns, we find abundant cause to facilitate ourselves in the excellence of our institutions. During a period fraught with difficulties and marked by very extraordinary events, the United States has flourished beyond example. Their citizens individually have been happy and the nation prosperous. Under this Constitution, our commerce has been wisely regulated with foreign nations and between the states. New states have been admitted into our Union. Our territory has been enlarged by far. An honorable treaty and with great advantage to the original states. The states, respectively, protected by the national government under a mild parental system against foreign dangers, and enjoying within their separate spheres, by a wise partition of power, a just proportion of the sovereignty, have improved their police, extended their settlements, and attained a strength and maturity which are the best proofs of wholesome laws well administered. Wholesome laws. So many of these politicians talking about wholesome laws. As though the last guy wasn't at war. And if we look to the condition of individuals, what a proud speculate does it spectacle. Speculate? Where the fuck? Spectacle does it exhibit. On whom has oppression fallen in any quarter of our union? Uh, uh, kind of forgetting a little bit of a little something there, Mr. Monroe. Who has been deprived of any right of person or property? Who is restrained from offering his vows in the mode which he prefers to the divine author of his being? There's a one big ol' glaring thing there, Mr. Monroe. Looks at the month of February. It is well known that all these blessings have been enjoyed to their fullest extent. And I add with peculiar satisfaction that there has been no example of a capital punishment being inflicted on anyone for the crime of high treason. Is there going to be a test? No. No. You need not worry, Neko. There will be a pop quiz though. You'll never expect it. Some who might admit the competency of our government to these beneficent. There we go. All right. Some who might admit the competency of our government to these beneficent duties might doubt it in trials which put to the test its strength and efficiency as a member of the great community of nations. Here, too, experience has afforded us the most satisfactory proof in its favor. Just as this constitution was put into action, several of the principal states of Europe had become much agitated, and some of them seriously convulsed. Destructive wars ensued, which have of late only been terminated. He's talking about Napoleon there. That's happening at around this time, right? In the course of these conflicts, the United States received great injury from several of the parties. Britain, War of 1812. It was their interest to stand aloof from the contest, to demand justice from the party committing the injury, and to cultivate by a fair and honorable conduct the friendship of all. War became at length inevitable, and the result has shown that our government is equal to that, the greatest of trials, under the most unfavorable of circumstances. Of the virtue of the people and of the heroic exploits of the army, the navy, and the militia, I need not speak. You know that Napoleon loved water slides and water parks? I did not. Nice. No wonder they exiled him to islands. So that he could slide into the ocean on the beaches. Such, then, is the happy government. Oh, no, wait. Okay, just making sure I didn't skip a page or anything. Such, then, is the happy government under which we live. A government inadequate to every a government adequate to every purpose. Sorry, a little bit of me slipped through there. A government adequate to every purpose for which the social compact is formed. A government elective in all its branches, under which every citizen may by his merit obtain the highest trust recognized by the Constitution, which contains within it no cause of discord, none to put at variance one portion of the community with another, a government which protects every citizen in the full enjoyment of his rights, and is able to protect the nation against injustice from foreign powers. Learn from watching Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Ah, nice, nice. Other considerations of the highest importance admonish us to cherish our union and to cling to the government which supports it. Fortunate as we are in our political institutions, we have not been less so in other circumstances on which our prosperity and happiness essentially depend. Situated, situated within the temperate zone and extending through many degrees of latitude along the Atlantic, the United States enjoys all the varieties of climate and every production incident to that portion of the globe. Penetrating internally to the Great Lakes and beyond the sources of the great rivers, which communicate through our whole interior, no country was ever happier with respect to its domain. Blessed, too, with a fertile soil, our produce has always been very abundant, leaving, even in the years of the least favorable, a surplus for the wants of our fellow men in other countries. Such is our peculiar felicity that there is not a part of our Union that is not particularly interested in preserving it. The great agricultural interest of the nation prospers under its protection. Local interests are not less fostered by it. Our fellow citizens of the North uh, engaged, engaged in navigation, find great encouragement in being made the favored carriers of the vast productions of the other portions of the United States, while the inhabitants of these are amply recompensed in their turn by the nursery for seamen and naval force thus formed and reared up for the support of our common rights. Our manufacturers find a generous encouragement by the policy which patronizes domestic industry, and the surplus of our produce a steady and profitable market by local wants in less favored parts at home. Capitalism. Seamen. Yep. Such, then, being the highly favored condition of our country, it is the interest of every citizen to maintain it. What are the dangers which menace us? If they exist, they are to be ascertained and guarded against. In explaining my sentiments on this subject, it may be asked, what raised us to the present happy state? How did we accomplish the revolution? Uh, how remedy the defects of the first instrument of our union by infusing into the national government sufficient power for national purposes without impairing the just rights of the states or affecting those of individuals? How sustain and pass with glory through the late war? Government has been in the hands of the people. To the people, therefore, and to the fruitful and able depositaries of their trust is the credit due. Had the people of the United States been educated in different principles, had they been less intelligent, less independent, or less virtuous, can it be believed that we should have maintained the same steady and consistent career or have been blessed with the same success? While then the constituent body retains its present sound and healthful state, everything will be safe. They will choose competent and faithful representatives for every department. It is only when the people become ignorant and corrupt, when they degenerate into a populace, that they are incapable of exercising the sovereignty. Usurpation is then an easy attainment, and an usurper soon found. The people themselves become the willing instruments of their own debasement and ruin. Let us, then, look to the great cause, and endeavor to preserve it in full force. Let us by all wise and constitutional measures promote intelligence among the people as the best means of preserving our liberties. Dangers from abroad are not less deserving of attention. Experiencing the fortune of other nations, the United States may be again involved in war, and it may in that event be the object of the adverse party to overset our government, to break our union, and demolish us as a nation. Our distance from Europe and the just, moderate, and pacific policy of our government may form some security against these dangers, but they ought to be anticipated and guarded against. Many of our citizens are engaged in commerce and navigation, and all of them are in a certain degree dependent on their prosperous state. Many are engaged in the fisheries. These interests are exposed to invasion and the wars between other powers, and we should disregard the faithful admonition of experience if we do not expect it. We must support our rights or lose our character, and with it, perhaps, our liberties. A people who fail to do it can scarcely be said to hold a place among independent nations. National honor is national property of the highest value. The sentiment in the mind of every citizen is national strength. It ought therefore to be cherished. To secure us against these dangers, our coast and inland frontiers should be fortified, our army and navy regulated upon just principles as to the force of each, be kept in perfect order, and our militia be placed on the best practicable footing. To put our extensive coast in such a state of defense as to secure our cities and interior from invasion will be attended with expense, but the work, when finished, will be permanent, and it is fair to presume that a single campaign of invasion by a naval force superior to our own, aided by a few thousand land troops, would expose us to greater expense, without taking into the estimate the loss of property and distress of our citizens, than would be sufficient for this great work. Our land and naval forces should be moderate but adequate to the necessary purposes, the former to garrison and preserve our fortifications and to meet the first invasions of a foreign foe, and, while constituting the elements of a greater force, to preserve the science as well as all the necessary implements of war in a state to be brought into activity in the event of war. The latter, retained within the limits proper of the in a state of peace, might aid in maintaining the neutrality of the United States with dignity and in wars of other powers, with dignity in the wars of other powers, and in saving the property of their citizens from spoliation. In time of war, with the enlargement of which the great naval resources of the country render it susceptible, and which should be duly fostered in time of peace, it would contribute essentially both as an auxiliary of defense and as a powerful engine of annoyance to diminish the calamities of war and to bring the war to a speedy and honorable termination. But it ought always to be held prominently in view that the safety of these states and of everything dear to the free people must depend in an eminent degree on the militia. Invasions may be made too formidable to be resisted by any land and naval force which it would comport, either with the principles of our government or circumstances of the United States to maintain. In such cases, recourse must be had to the great body of the people, and in a manner to produce the best effect. It is of the highest importance, therefore, that they be so organized and trained as to be prepared for any emergency. The arrangement should be such as to put at the command of the government the ardent patriotism and youthful vigor of the country. If formed on equal and just principles, it can not be oppressive. It is the crisis which makes the pressure, and not the laws, which provide a remedy for it. This arrangement should be formed, too, in time of peace, to be the better prepared for war. With such an organization of such a people of the United States, the United States have nothing to dread from foreign invasion. At its approach, an overwhelming force of gallant men might always be put in motion. Other interests of high importance will claim attention, among which the improvement of our country. So, like that right there, and we just read, that's the Monroe Doctrine. I'm pretty sure. We're like, yeah, that's setting up a permanent military, and thus we see the beginning of the military-industrial complex in America. Yippee! Other interests of high importance will claim attention, among which the improvement of our country by roads and canals, proceeding always with a constitutional sanction, holds a distinguished place. By thus facilitating the intercourse between the states, we shall add much to the convenience and comfort of our fellow citizens, such to the ornament of the country, and, what is of greater importance, we shall shorten distances, and by making each part more accessible to and dependent on the other, we shall bind the union more closely together. Nature has done so much for us by intersecting the country with so many great rivers, bays, and lakes, approaching from distant points so near to each other, that the inducement to complete the works seems to be peculiarly strong. A more interesting spectacle was perhaps never seen than is exhibited within the limits of the United States. Territories so vast and advantageously situated, containing objects so grand, so useful, so happily connected in all their parts. Our manufacturers will likewise require the systematic and fostering care of the government, possessing as we do all the raw materials, the fruit of our own soil and industry. We ought not to depend on the degree we have done on supplies from other countries. While we are thus dependent, the sudden event of war, unsought and unexpected, cannot fail to plunge us into the most serious difficulties. It is important too that the capital which nourishes our manufacturers should be domestic, as its influence in that case instead be exhausting, as it may do in foreign hands, would be felt advantageously on agriculture and every other branch of industry. Equally important is it to provide at home a market for our raw materials, as by extending the competition, it will enhance the price and protect the cultivator against the casualties against the casualties incident to foreign markets. Sip a drink. Might actually need to take a short break just to get some more water. I'm almost out of tea. Oh no. Here we go. Here comes imperialism against the natives. With the Indian tribes, it is our duty to cultivate friendly relations and to act with kindness and liberality in all our transactions. What? Equally prosper, equally proper is it to persevere in our efforts to extend to them the advantages of civilization. There it is. There's the supremacy. Just let them live, man. The great amount of our revenue and the flourishing state of the treasury are a full proof of the competency of the national resources for any emergency, as they are of the willingness of our fellow citizens to bear the burdens which the public necessities require. The vast amount of vacant lands, the value of which daily augments, forms an additional resource of great extent and duration. These resources, besides accomplishing every other necessary purpose, put it completely in the power of the United States to discharge the national debt at an early period. Peace is the best time for improvement and preparation of every kind. It is in peace that our commerce flourishes most, that taxes are most easily paid, and that the revenue is most productive. The executive is charged officially in the departments under it with the disbursement of the public money and is responsible for the faithful application of it to the purposes for which it is raised. The legislator is the watchful guardian over the public purse. It is its duty to see that the disbursement has been honestly made. To meet the requisite responsibility, every facility should be afforded to the executive to enable it to bring the public agents entrusted with the public money strictly and promptly to account. Nothing should be presumed against them, but if, with the requisite facilities, the public money is suffered to lie long and uselessly in their hands, they will not be the only defaulters, nor will the demoralizing effect be confined to them. It will evince a relaxation and want of tone in the administration which will be felt by the whole community. I shall do all I can to secure economy and fidelity in this important branch of the administration, and I doubt not that the legislature will perform its duty with equal zeal. Thorough examination should be regularly made, and I will promote it. It is particularly gratifying to me to enter on the discharge of these duties at a time when the United States are blessed with peace. It is a state most consistent with their prosperity and happiness. It will be my sincere desire to preserve it, so far as depends on the executive, on the principles with all nations, claiming nothing unreasonable of any, and rendering to each what is its due. Equally gratifying is it to witness the increased harmony of opinion which pervades our Union. Discord does not belong to our system. Union is recommended as well by the free and benign principles of our government, extending its blessings to every individual as by the other eminent advantages attending it. The American people have encountered together great dangers and sustained severe trials with success. They constitute one great family with a common interest. Experience has enlightened us on some questions of essential importance to the country. The progress has been slow, dictated by a just reflection and a faithful regard to every interest connected with it. To promote this harmony in accord with the principles of our republican government, and in a manner to give them the most complete effect, and to advance in all other respects the best interests of our Union, will be the object of my constant and zealous exertions. Never did a government commence under auspices so favorable, nor ever so successful, or nor ever was success so complete. If we look to the history of other nations, ancient or modern, we find no example of growth so rapid, so gigantic, of a people so prosperous and happy. In contemplating what we have still to perform, the heart of every citizen must expand with joy when he reflects how near our government has approached to perfection. That in respect to it, we have no essential improvement to make. That the great object is to preserve it in the essential principles and features which characterize it, and that is to be done by preserving the virtue and enlightening the minds of the people, and as a security against foreign dangers, to adopt such arrangements as are indispensable to the support of our independence, our rights, and our liberties. If we persevere in the career in which we have advanced so far, and in the path already traced, we cannot fail, under the favor of the gracious Providence, to attain the high destiny which seems to await us. In the administrations of the illustrious men who have preceded me in this high station, with some of whom I have been connected by the closest ties from early life, examples are presented which will always be found highly instructive and useful to their successors. From these I shall endeavor to derive all the advantages which they may afford. Of my immediate predecessor, under whom so important a portion of this great and successful experiment has been made, I shall be pardoned for expressing my earnest wishes that he may long enjoy in his retirement the affections of a grateful country, the best reward of exalted talents, and the most faithful and meritorious service. Relying on the aid to be derived from the other departments of the government, I enter on the trust to which I have been called by the suffrages of my fellow citizens, with my fervent prayers to the Almighty that He will be graciously pleased to continue to us that protection which He has already so conspicuously displayed in our favor. Okay, that's a long. Took like 20 minutes, 30 minutes to read. All right, we are going to take a short break just so that I can get some water and to rest my voice a little bit. Let's see. We're gonna take like a little 3-minute break. Boop, boop. I'm back. Got some water. All right. All right. James Monroe is broken like 40-ish years, like 30 to 40 years of tradition. Given his speech on March 5th for his second inaugural address. For shame. For shame. Can't believe this. All right. James Monroe, second inaugural address, Monday, March 5th, 1821. Fellow citizens, I shall not attempt to describe the grateful emotions which the new and very distinguished proof of the confidence of my fellow citizens, evinced by my re-election to this high trust, has excited in my bosom. The approbation which it announces of my conduct in the preceding term affords me a consolation which I shall profoundly feel through life. The general accord with which it has been expressed adds to the great and never ceasing obligations which it imposes. To merit the continuance of this good opinion and to carry it with me into my retirement as the solace of advancing years will be the object of my most zealous and unceasing efforts. Having no pretensions to the high and commanding claims of my predecessors, whose names are so much more conspicuously identified with our revolution, and who contributed so preeminently to promote its success, I consider myself rather as an instrument than the cause of the Union. Uh, the instrument than the cause of the Union, which has prevailed in the late election. In surmounting, in favor of my humble pretensions, the difficulties which so often produce division like other occurrences, it is obvious that other powerful causes, indicating the great strength and stability of our union, have essentially contributed to draw you together. That these powerful causes exist, and that they are permanent, is my fixed opinion. That they may produce a like accord in all questions touching, however remotely, the liberty, prosperity, and happiness of our country will always be the object of my most fervent prayers to the Supreme Author of all good. Uh, in a government, I was taking my glasses off. My glasses are not reading glasses. Uh, in a government which is founded by the people, who possess exclusively the sovereignty, it seems proper that the people who may be placed by their suffrages in this high trust should declare, on commencing its duties, the principles on which he intends to conduct the administration. If the person thus elected has served the preceding term, an opportunity is afforded him to review its principal occurrences and to give such further explanation respecting them as is his judgment. Uh, as is his as in his judgment may be useful to his constituents. The events of one year have the events of one year have influence on those of another, and in like manner of the preceding on the succeeding administration. The movements of a great nation are connected to all their parts. If errors have been committed, they ought to be corrected. If the policy is sound, it ought to be supported. It is by a thorough knowledge of the whole subject that our fellow citizens are enabled to judge correctly of the past and to give a proper direction to the future. Just before the commencement of the last term of the United States had concluded a war with a very powerful nation on conditions equal and honorable to both parties. The events of that war are too recent and too deeply impressed on the memory of all to require development from me. Our commerce had been in a great measure driven from the sea. Our Atlantic and inland frontiers were invaded in almost every part. The waste of life along our coast and on some parts of our inland frontiers, to the defense of which our gallant and patriotic citizens were called, was immense. In addition to which, not less than 120 million were added dollars were added to its end to the public debt. As soon as the war had terminated, the nation, admonished by its events, resolved to place itself in a situation which should be better calculated to prevent the recurrence of a like evil, and, in case it should recur, to mitigate its calamities. With this view, after reducing our land force to the basis of a peace establishment, which has been further modified since, provision has was made for the construction of fortifications at proper points through the whole extent of our coast, and such an augmentation of our naval force as should be well adapted to both purposes. The laws making this provision were passed in 1815 and 1816, and it has been since the constant effort of the executive to carry them into effect. Militarism. The advantage of these fortifications and of the augmented naval force in the extent contemplated in a point of economy has been fully illustrated by a report of the Board of Engineers and Naval Commissioners lately communicated to Congress, by which it appears that in an invasion by 20,000 men with a correspondent naval force, in a campaign of 6 months only, the whole expense of the construction of the works would be defrayed by the difference in the sum necessary to maintain the force which would be adequate to our defense, with the aid of those works, and that which would be incurred without them. The reason of this difference is obvious. If fortifications are judiciously placed on our great inlets, as distant from our cities as circumstances will permit, they will form the only points of attack, and the enemy will be detained there by a small regular force, a sufficient time to enable our militia to collect and repair to that on which the attack is made. A force adequate to the enemy, collected at that single point, with suitable preparation for such others as might be menaced, is all that would be requisite. But if there were no fortifications, then the enemy might go where he pleased, and, changing his position and sailing from place to place, our force must be called out and spread in vast numbers along the whole coast, and on both sides of every bay and river, as high up in each as it might be navigable for ships of war. By these fortifications, supported by our navy, to which they would afford like support, we should present to other powers an armed front from St. Croix to the Sabine, which would protect in the event of war our whole coast and interior from invasion, and even the wars of other powers in which we were neutral. They would be found eminently useful, as by keeping their public ships at a distance from our cities, peace and order in them would be preserved and the government be protected from insult. Ugh, so much militarism here. It need scarcely be remarked that these measures have not been resorted to in a spirit of hostility to other powers. Such a disposition does not exist toward any power. Peace and good will have been, and will hereafter be, cultivated with all and by the most faithful regard to justice. They have been dictated by a love of peace, of economy, and an earnest desire to save the lives of our fellow citizens from that destruction in our country, from that devastation which are inseparable from war when it finds us unprepared for it. It is believed, and experience has shown, that such a preparation is the best expedient that can be resorted to prevent war. I add, with much pleasure, that considerable progress has already been made in these measures of defense, and that they will be completed in a few years, considering, turns page, the great extent and importance of the object, if the plan be zealously and steadily persevered in. Keep wanting to read persevere as preserved. Okay. The conduct of the government in what relates to foreign powers is always an object of the highest importance to the nation. Its agriculture, commerce, manufactures, fisheries, revenue, in short, its peace, may all be affected by it. Attention is therefore due to this subject. Straighten out my back. At the period adverted to the powers of Europe, after having been engaged in long and destructive wars with each other, had concluded a peace which happily still exists. Our peace with the power with whom we had been engaged had also been concluded. The war with Spain and the colonies of South America, and the colonies in South America, which had commenced many years before, was then the only conflict that remained unsettled. This being a contest between different parts of the same community, in which other powers had not interfered, was not affected by their accommodations. This contest was considered at an early stage by my predecessor a civil war, in which the parties were entitled to equal rights in our ports. This decision, the first made by any power, being formed on great consideration of the comparative strength and resources of the parties, the length of time and successful opposition made by the colonies, and of all other circumstances on which it ought to depend, was in strict accord with the laws of nations. Congress has invariably acted on this principle, having made no change in our relations with either party. Our attitude has therefore been that of neutrality between them, which has been maintained by the government with the strictest impartiality. No aid has been afforded to either, nor has any privilege been enjoyed by the one which has not been equally open to the other party. And every exertion has been made in its power to enforce the execution of the laws prohibiting illegal equipments with equal rigor against both. By this equality between the parties, their public vessels have been received in our ports on the same footing. They have enjoyed an equal right to purchase and export arms, munitions of war, and every other supply, the exportation of all articles, whatever being permitted under laws which were passed long before the commencement of the contest. Our citizens have traded equally with both, and their commerce with each has been alike protected by the government. Respecting the attitude which it may be proper for the United States to maintain hereafter between parties, I have no hesitation in stating it as my opinion that the neutrality heretofore observed should still be adhered to. From the change in the government of Spain and the negotiation now depending, invited by the Cortes and accepted by the colonies, it may be presumed that their differences will be settled on the terms proposed by the colonies. Should the war be continued, the United States, regarding its circumstances, will always have it in their power to adopt such measures respecting it as their honor and interest may require. Shortly after the general peace, a band of adventurers took advantage of this conflict and of the facility which it afforded to establish a system of buccaneering in the neighboring seas, to the great annoyance of the commerce of the United States and, as was represented, of that of other powers. Of this spirit and of its injurious bearing on the United States, strong proofs were afforded by the establishment of Amelia Island, and the purposes to which it was made instrumental by this band in 1817, and by the occurrences which took place in other parts of Florida in 1818, the details of which, in both instances, are too well known to require to be now recited. Oh man, I want to know. I don't know what it is. I wasn't there. Yeah, sounds like piracy. Good old piracy. This is the 1800s, so would be a good amount of pirates going about the place. Ooh, neck hurts. Okay. I'm satisfied. Uh, yeah. I am satisfied had a less decisive course been adopted, that the worst consequences would have resulted from it. We have seen that these checks, decisive as they were not sufficient to crush that piratical spirit. Uh, Many culprits brought within our limits have been condemned to suffer death, the punishment due to that atrocious crime. The decisions of upright and enlightened tribunals fall equally on all whose crimes subject them, and by a fair interpretation of the law, to its censor. It belongs to the executive not to suffer the executions under these decisions to transcend the great purpose for which punishment is necessary, full extent of example being secured, policy as well as humanity equally forbids that they should be carried further. I have acted on this principle, pardoning those who appear to have been led astray by ignorance of the criminality of the acts they had committed, and suffering the law to take effect on those only in whose favor no extenuating circumstances could be urged. Great confidence is entertained that the late treaty with Spain, which has been ratified by both parties, and the ratifications whereof have been exchanged, has placed the relations of the two countries on a basis of permanent friendship. The provision made by it for such of our citizens uh, as have claims on Spain of the character described will, it is presumed, be very satisfactory to them. And the boundary which is established between the territories of the parties westward and the Mississippi, heretofore in dispute, has, it is thought, been settled on conditions just and advantageous to both. But to the acquisition of Florida, too much importance cannot be attached. It secures to the United States a territory important in itself, and whose importance is much increased by its bearing on many of the highest interests of the Union. It opens to several of the neighboring states a free passage to the ocean, through the province ceded by several rivers, having their sources high up, within their limits. It secures us against all future annoyance from powerful Indian tribes. It gives us several excellent harbors in the Gulf of Mexico for ships of war of the largest size. There's that war stuff again. It covers by its position in the Gulf, the Mississippi, and other great waters within our extended limits, and thereby enables the United States to afford complete protection to the vast and very valuable productions of our whole western country, which find a market through those streams. Little do they know what Florida will become. The, like, fucking crack house of America. Uh, and retirement home. Crack-tirement home. Uh, and gators. Ruled by gators. All right. By treaty with the British government, bearing date on the 20th of October, 1818, the convention regulating the commerce between the United States and Great Britain concluded on the 3rd of July, 1815, which was about expiring, was revived and continued for the term of 10 years from the time of its expiration. By that treaty, also, the differences which had arisen under the Treaty of Ghent respecting the right claimed by the United States for their citizens to take and cure fish on the coast of His Britannic Majesty's dominions in America, with other differences on important interests, were adjusted to the satisfaction of both parties. No agreement has yet been entered into respecting the commerce between the United States and the British dominions in the West Indies and on this continent. The restraints imposed on that commerce by Great Britain and reciprocated by the United States on the principle of defense continue still in force. The negotiation with France for the regulation of the commercial relations between the two countries, which in the course of the last summer had been commenced at Paris, has since been transferred to this city and will be pursued on the part of the United States in the spirit of conciliation and with an earnest desire that it may terminate in an arrangement satisfactory to both powers or parties. Our relation with the Barbary powers are preserved in the same state, and by the same means they were employed when I came into this office. As early as 1801, it was found necessary to send a squadron into the Mediterranean for the protection of our commerce, and no period has intervened, a short term excepted, when it was thought advisable to withdraw it. The great interests which the United States have in the Pacific, in commerce, and in the fisheries, have also made it necessary to maintain a naval force there. In disposing of this force, in both instances, the most effectual measure in our power. Hmm. Alright. Okay. Maintaining a naval force there. Disposing of this force in both instances, the effectual measures in our power have been taken without interfering with its other duties for the suppression of the slave trade and of piracy in the neighboring seas. Okay. The situation in the United States in regard to their resources, the extent of their revenue, and the facility with which it is raised affords a most gratifying spectacle. Payment of nearly $67 million of the public debt, with the great progress made in measures of defense and in other improvements of various kinds since the late war, are conclusive proofs of this extraordinary prosperity, especially when it is recollected that these expenditures have been defrayed. All right. See that the racists are starting to come out. It is getting dark. That is when the monsters show up. So I guess it makes sense. Where was I? $67 million of the public debt, with the great progress made in measures of defense and other improvements of various kinds since the late war, are conclusive proofs of this extraordinary prosperity. I'm a racist. I'm a Putin Giga Chad. Russian Giga Chad. Uh huh. Anyone who has to describe themselves as a Giga Chad is, in fact, not a Giga Chad. A conclusive boost of extraordinary prosperity, especially when it is recollected that these expenditures have been defrayed without a burden on the people. Notice that they always spell like burden as burthen. This is interesting. A little like interesting grammatical thing. Make me actually have my glasses on. Alright. Let's see. Learn Russian. Eh. Unfortunately, I have difficulties learning languages, mainly because I just don't really use them. But do stick to English, please. Don't cry. Report. What? Huh? Oh. Alright. Let's see. Now, the unfortunate thing is, I did not get to the end of the paragraph. Alright. Burthen on the people. The direct tax and excise has been repealed soon after the conclusion of the late war, and the revenue applied to these great objects having been raised in a manner not to be felt. Our great resources therefore remain untouched for any purpose which may affect the vital interests of a nation. For all such purposes, they are inexhaustible. They are more especially to be found in the virtue, patriotism, and intelligence of our fellow citizens, and in the devotion with which they would yield up, by any just measure, the taxation, all their property in support of their rights and honor of their country. Let's see. How long is this speech? Jesus, Monroe, why? Why you speak so much, man? You saying too much, Monroe. Your imperialism. Under the present depression of prices affecting all the productions of the country and every branch of industry proceeding from causes explained on a former occasion, the revenue has considerably diminished, the effect of which has been to compel Congress either to abandon their great measures of defense or to resort to loans or internal taxes to supply the deficiency. On the presumption that this depression and the deficiency in the revenue arising from it would, turns page, be temporary, loans were authorized for the demands of the last and present year. Anxious to relieve my fellow citizens in 1817 from every burthen which could be dispensed with, and the state of the treasury permitting it, I recommended the repeal of the internal taxes, knowing that such relief was then peculiarly necessary in consequence of the great exertions made in the late war. That I made that recommendation under a pledge that should be public Exigencies? Know that word. Cool. Exigencies. Definition. Exigence. An urgent demand, a pressing requirement. Okay. All right. Da, 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 da. Where is it? Exigencies. For a recurrence of them at any time while I remained in this trust, I would with great promptitude perform the duty which would then be alike incumbent on me. By the experiment now making it will be seen by the next session of Congress whether the revenue shall have been so augmented as to be adequate to all these necessary purposes. Should the deficiency still continue, especially should it be probable that it would be permanent, the course to be pursued appears to me to be obvious. I am satisfied that under certain circumstances, loans may be resorted to with great advantage. I am equally well satisfied, as a general rule, that the demands of the current year, especially in time of peace, should be provided for by the revenue of that year. I have never dreaded, nor have I ever shunned, in any situation in which I've been placed making appeals to the virtue and patriotism of my fellow citizens, well knowing that they could never be made in vain, especially in times of great emergency or for purposes of high national importance, independently of the exigency, exigency, exigency of the case. Many considerations of great weight urged a policy leaving in view a provision of revenue to meet to a certain extent the demands of the nation, without relying altogether on the precarious resources of foreign commerce. I am satisfied with internal duties and excises, with corresponding imports on foreign articles of the same kind, would, without imposing any serious burdens on the people, enhance the price of produce, promote our manufactures, and augment the revenue at the same time that they made it more secure and permanent. The care of the Indian. Oh, here comes imperialism. Uh, Against the natives. The care of the Indian tribes within our limits has long been an essential part of our system, but unfortunately it has not been executed in a manner to accomplish all the objects intended by it. We have treated them as independent nations without their having any substantial pretensions to that rank. The distinction has flattered their pride, retarded their improvement, and in many instances paved the way to their destruction. The progress of our settlements westward, supported as they are by a dense population, has constantly driven them back, with almost the total sacrifice of the lands which they have been compelled to abandon. They have claims on the magnanimity, and I may add, on the justice of this nation, which we must all feel. We shall become their real benefactors. We should perform the office of their great father, the endearing title which they emphatically give to the chief magistrate of our union. Their sovereignty over vast territories should cease, in lieu of which the right of soil should be secured to each individual and his posterity in confident portions, and for the territory thus ceded by each tribe, some reasonable equivalent should be granted to be vested in permanent funds for the support of civil government over them, and for the education of their children, for their instruction in the arts of husbandry, and to provide sustenance for them until they could provide it for themselves. They were already providing it to themselves, dude. My earnest hope is that Congress will digest some plan founded on these principles with such improvements as their wisdom may suggest, and carry it into effect as soon as it may be practicable. Ugh. Oh, American imperialism. Gotta love it. Just destroy their communities and be surprised when they're having difficulties with stuff. Europe is again unsettled, and the prospect of war increasing, as it does in Europe. Should the flame light up in any quarter, how far it may extend, it is impossible to foresee. It is our peculiar felicity to be altogether unconnected with the causes which produce this menacing aspect elsewhere. With every power, we are in perfect amity, or amity, and it is our interest to remain so if it be practicable on just conditions. I see no reasonable cause to apprehend variance with any power unless it proceeds from a violation of our maritime rights. In these contests, should they occur, and to whatever extent they may be carried, we shall be neutral. But as a neutral power, we have rights which it is our duty to maintain. For like injuries, it will be incumbent on us to seek redress in a spirit of amity, in full confidence that injuring none would knowingly injure us. For more imminent dangers, we should be prepared, and it should always be recollected that such preparation, adapted to the circumstances and sanctioned by the judgment and wishes of our constituents, cannot fail to have a good effect in averting dangers of every kind. We should recollect also that the season of peace is best adapted to these preparations. If we turn our attention, fellow citizens, more immediately to the internal concerns of our country. God. James Monroe, you speak too much, man. How much is left? Okay, just like 2 more pages. These last 2 pages. It's like, my guy, shut up. Internal concerns of our country, and more especially to those on which its future welfare depends, we have every reason to anticipate the happiest results. It is now rather more than 44 years since we declared our independence, and 37 since it was acknowledged. The talents and virtues which were displayed in that great struggle were a sure presage of all that has since followed. Of people who were able to uh, surmount in their infant state such great perils would be more confident as they rose into manhood to repel any which they might meet in their progress. Their physical strength would be more adequate to foreign danger, and the practice of self-government, aided by the light of experience, could not fail to produce an effect equally salutary on all those questions connected with the internal organization. These favorable anticipations have been realized. Take a sip of water. Ah, big sippies. Big sippies had. All right. In our whole system, national and state, we have shunned all the defects which unceasingly preyed on the vitals and destroyed the ancient republics. In them, there were distinct orders, a nobility, and a people, or the people governed in one assembly. Thus, in the one instance, there was a perpetual conflict between the orders in society for the ascendancy, in which the victory of either terminated in the overthrow of the government and the ruin of the state, and the other in which the people governed in a body, and whose dominions seldom exceeded the dimensions of a country in one of our states. A tumultuous and disorderly movement permitted only a transitory existence. In this great nation there is but one order, that of the people, whose power, by a peculiarly happy improvement of the representative principle, is transformed is transferred from them without impairing in the slightest degree to uh, their sovereignty to bodies of their own creation, and to persons elected by themselves with the full extent necessary for all the purposes of free, enlightened, and efficient government. The whole system is elective, the complete sovereignty being in the people, and every officer in every department deriving his authority from and being responsible to them for his conduct. All right. Our career has corresponded with this great outline. Perfection in our organization could not have been expected in the outset either in the national or state governments or in tracing the line between their respective powers, but no serious conflict has arisen, nor any contest, but such as are managed by argument and by a fair appeal to the good sense of the people, and many of the defects which experience had clearly demonstrated in both governments have been remedied. By steadily pursuing this course in this spirit, there is every reason to believe that our system will soon attain the highest degree of perfection uh, of which human institutions are capable, and that the movement in all its branches will exhibit such a degree of order and harmony as to command the admiration and respect of the civilized world. Mm. Eh, not sure if admiration and respect would be words I would use, or like fear and rivalry. Let's see. Our physical attainments have not been less eminent. 25 years ago, the brethren had no outlet for their commerce. What has been the progress since that time? The river has not only become the property of the United States from its source to the ocean, with all its tributary systems, with the exception of the upper part of the Red River only, but Louisiana, with a fair and liberal boundary on the western side of the Florida, and the Floridas on the eastern, have been ceded to us. The United States now enjoy the complete and uninterrupted sovereignty over the whole territory from St. Croix to the Sabine. New states settled from among ourselves in this and in other parts, have been admitted into our union in equal participation in the national sovereignty with the original states. Our population is augmented in an astonishing degree and extended in every direction. We now, fellow citizens, comprise within our limits the dimensions and faculties of a great power under a government possessing all the energies of any government ever known to the old world, with an with an utter incapacity to oppress the people, except for people of African and native descent. And I think by the end of the century, Asian descent. Entering with these views the office which I have just solemnly sworn to execute with fidelity and to the utmost of my ability, I derive great satisfaction from a knowledge that I shall be assisted in the several departments by the very enlightened and upright citizens, from whom I have received so much aid in the preceding term. With full confidence in the continuance of that candor and generous indulgence from my fellow citizens at large, which I have heretofore experienced, and with a firm reliance on the protection of Almighty God, I shall forthwith commence all duties of the high trust to which you have called me. Uh, Next one's pretty long, too. Not like 15 minutes long, definitely seems longer than that. And of course, the guy after Andrew Jackson, which, by the way, fuck Andrew Jackson. Super short. Super short. least half an hour to read this one. The next one would be John Quincy Adams, but I think we're actually going to stop here for today. We're coming up on time in like 15 minutes, and I don't think I would be able to finish this one in 15 minutes. Yeah. Given my reading speed, it'd be like what, 3 minutes per page? Like 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24-ish. Like, yeah, about 30 minutes. And plus, I can feel my voice starting to go. Anyways, I don't think I have a bookmark. That's unfortunate. I'll have to look for something to do that. Make a bookmark with. But, yeah. We shall stop there for today. All right. Do a little bit of that retroactively. All right. Tomorrow, we'll get back to our normal streams. We'll return to some Rogue Trader, Warhammer 40k, which will be a good time as we enter Kiava Gamma, which is main story stuff. So like looks at Neko. No, you were avoiding those. Big stretchy. And yeah. Now though, we will probably have some more historical readings throughout the year, like Juneteenth. I want to do something. Actually, what day is Juneteenth? Like June. Is it Juneteenth? Like 19th, June 19th. That's a Wednesday. That's gonna be, if we're still going at that point. D&D might do like a earlier one. Checking if there's any other like holidays upcoming. We might be able to do some stuff on Patrick's Day. Okay. Easter Day, not really a Christian thing. It's like going through my calendar app on my phone to see what, or rather on my computer, just to see what holidays there are throughout the year. April. Of course, it just doesn't go out that far. There's holidays and the like. May. Oh, let's see. Okay, yeah, it doesn't even show July 4th. Maybe actually using my app on my phone would be a better decision. Let's see. First day of Women's History Month is March. April. Ah, yes, tax day. Can read the tax code. That'd be an interesting read. Let's see. Ooh, Cinco de Mayo. It's also a Sunday though. Let's see, what's May? Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Oh, I believe it's also Military Month, or like Military Family Month. Memorial Day on May 27th. We've got Juneteenth, a Wednesday. I don't even know what the fuck is celebrated on Flag Day, I'll be honest. Got Independence Day in July. Labor Day in September. First day of Hispanic Heritage Month on the 15th? In the middle of the month? Got Columbus Day in October, as well as Indigenous Peoples Day. Maybe try seeing if one of my books has like some treaties with natives that we did not absolutely break because America's terrible at that shit. Gee. Oh, I actually have like the Monroe Doctrine text on Indian removal. God, that would be a fucked up thing to read on that day. Uh, I don't, I don't really have anything native about like Native Americans to read historically. Could always purchase something. I don't know. Let's see, Election Day, good old Election Day, Veterans Day, Native American Heritage Day is on day after Thanksgiving. November is just for the most part. Uh, that. And then next Martin Luther King's Day, I want to try getting maybe a collection of speeches or other works by Martin Luther King and read that next year. But yeah, for now, at the very least, maybe see about doing something on Juneteenth before D&D starts. Maybe like a couple hours. See if I can wake up early on that day and do a little bit of reading, maybe from Frederick Douglass, and then July 4th, maybe we'll either continue what we were reading from Frederick Douglass or maybe start the autobiography of Ben Franklin that I have. But whatever. That's the future. My voice is dying. I can hear my voice being all croaky. But yeah, we shall end it here for today. Boop.